From Green Goblin to Venom, Sam Raimi's Spider-Man universe plays host to some of the most iconic members of Spider-Man's rogues gallery. However, the universe of Sam Raimi's Spider-Man is far more layered than it may seem just by watching the films. So join me as we go beyond the RaimiVerse to discover various adversaries that Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man would go on to face, just not on the big screen. This is Beyond the RaimiVerse. Welcome back to another episode of Beyond the RaimiVerse. And in this episode, we're looking at another despicable duo, joined at the hip, inseparable from universe to universe. Well, when it comes to movies and games anyway. Herman Schultz, aka The Shocker. Yeah, I said he wouldn't be getting his own episode, and technically I'm not lying. He made his very first appearance in Amazing Spider-Man 46 in March of 1967, created by Stan Lee and John Romita Sr. Schultz was a high school dropout who became an expert at engineering and inventing. But this is no Tony Stark right here. This guy instead used his talents to pursue a life of crime. And after being incarcerated, Herman Schultz took on his Shocker persona with his shock gauntlets, which allowed him to escape from prison. But when it came to Shocker in the RaimiVerse, he didn't come to this party alone. Enter Adrian Toomes, aka the Vulture, who made his first appearance in Amazing Spider-Man 2, the comic, not the movie, in May of 1963, created by Steve Ditko and Stan Lee, another inventor who turned to a professional life of crime. When it came to Spider-Man, the movie, the game back in 2002, these two were paired up for their own little story together. Echoes of this ripple as far forward as 2017 for Spider-Man Homecoming, the solo movie debut of the MCU Spider-Man, where once again these two characters were paired up, and it's understandable given that they are both in the sort of realm of guys who created their own superpowers. Not so much experiments gone wrong, but people who deliberately entered their supervillain personas. Of course, a major difference between Shocker and Vulture has always been that the Vulture actually tried to be something, but was fired from his business partnership with Gregory Bestman. And this is kind of what caused him to go on to a life of crime, whereas Shocker just straight up didn't care in the first place. He was gonna do a life of crime. So let's dive into the RaimiVerse for another shared episode. But, wait a minute. I see you enjoying this video. But have you subscribed? This series is an ongoing channel fixture. I don't know when it's gonna end. And when it does, you can bet we're gonna be looking at the extended universe of the Mark Webb movies. So metaphorically speaking, pull up a chair and stick around, my friend. And, said it once, I'll say it again. Hit the subscribe button. What's that? You've already done it? Well, sick, thanks. Be sure to hit the like button as well to help this video rise the ranks of the YouTube algorithm. You see, YouTube thinks people want to see videos of Nick Avocado stuffing his face, but what we all know is that you guys want to see Spider-Man, so if you want more Spider-Man, hit the like button. And if you want to be able to thank yourself for this Spider-Man content, you can also join the Patreon below and help me produce these videos. Time is money, and the more money I get, the more time I have to make these videos. Your pledges go a long way, and I'm hugely appreciative of it. The RaimiVerse journey of Vulture and Shocker begins at Spider-Man the movie, the game, in 2002. Shocker and Vulture were in cahoots for a jewel heist, and naturally Spidey gives chase. The Vulture gets away, but old Webhead is hot on the tail of the Shocker, with a brawl transpiring at Grand Central Station, escalating into a hostage situation. But of course, even in his early days, this is Spider-Man we're talking about. He's got it covered. All of which results in a standoff between Spidey and Shocker in the subway station, where it's proven that Shocker's gauntlets can deal some serious damage, even creating his own little tornadoes. But this is where we see that Shocker is a seriously petty villain. After being defeated, because he knows that he's not gonna get his cut, he doesn't want his ally the Vulture getting his cut either, so he reveals Vulture's location to Spider-Man, and so Spidey heads to the old clock tower on the Lower East Side, where the Vulture has built his lair. A lair lined with explosives and traps that Spidey has to navigate, but also living in the top of a tower. Like, he's really taking this whole Vulture thing seriously. Even going so far as to just burn down parts of his own lair. I'm pretty sure that can't be good for the infrastructure of the building. Upon reaching the top of the tower, Vulture flees, and we're treated to a thrilling chase in the skies of New York. packed with jokes all about how the Vulture is old and bald and he has no hair.
You couldn't just leave this a personal disagreement, could you, Baldy? Hey, come back. The food at the old folks' home wasn't that bad, was it?
That's kind of hurtful, no? There's a really cool atmosphere to this as well, with it raining. Like, why do we so rarely see rain in Spider-Man games? Answer, because they don't take place in Britain. And I don't know, I guess the Vulture just decides, hey, I don't want to be chased anymore, so he fights back, and we get our in-air boss fight against the Vulture, and seriously, for 2002, this was really cool. I gotta say, I just really like how open-ended these boss fights with the Vulture in the Activision games felt. I don't think they've quite recaptured that with Insomniac just yet. This isn't a comparison video. Spidey takes down the Vulture, takes back the jewels, and hands him over to the police. And that was the end of Vulture for Spider-Man the movie, the game. Now from here, we've got two potential paths to take. Because yes, these guys would make a return in Spider-Man 2 the game. But there are two different versions of Spider-Man 2 the game. There's Spider-Man 2 on the PSP, and Spider-Man 2 on the, well, everything else. Except for the PC. The PC version. God, imagine growing up with that version of the game and it's just like, what is everyone talking about? Why does everyone think Spider-Man 2 the game's so good? Alright, eeny, meeny, miny, mo, catch a spider by the toe. We're going with the PSP version first. You see, Spider-Man 2 on the PSP feels much more like an actual sequel to Spider-Man the movie, the game, than its pretty much everything else counterpart. For starters, the exact same gameplay style. It even reuses little bits of music from Spider-Man the movie, the game here and there. And of course, the story we've got with the Shocker and Vulture feels so much more like a continuation of what we had in Spider-Man 1 the game. So I like to think that these two games are in the same continuity and that Spider-Man 2 the game was a game of the movie with bits of the... I don't know what to do anymore. I'm stumped. So Shocker and Vulture have escaped from prison, all thanks to a certain rhinoceros-inclined person. When you need some muscle, Rhino's your guy, it seems. So everything seems to be going well for Peter. He's gonna go see MJ's play. He thinks for a moment he's forgotten his ticket, but no, it's fine, he's got it. Except there have been bombs placed around the city.
Am I not supposed to have what I want?
No, you're not. Why do you keep asking that, man? And who's behind all the bombs? None other than the Vulture. And in many ways, this acts as kind of a reprisal of everything that happened in the first game. I mean, it's fair enough, given that this is on a different console entirely. You chase the Vulture down, although this time with more goons, and you then wail on him. And the outcome here is kind of like a switcheroo from the previous one, in that this time, Vulture dobs in the Shocker. Neither one of these guys can be trusted. I would not want them on my team. But to be fair, Shocker screwed him over first. And I don't just mean first in Spider-Man 1 the game, I mean first here as well. You see, they were going to do a job together at the docks, but once Shocker met Rhino, he instead replaced Vulture with Rhino. I mean, to be fair, I think we'd all do that. Because at least Rhino's not going to forget his medication. See, I can do the old people jokes as well. So Spider-Man chases the two down at the docks, and takes them both down. Done deal. It's basically the same thing as in Spider-Man 1 the game, but in reverse now with Rhino thrown in there. Once again, this definitely feels like a sequel to Spider-Man the movie, the game, more so than the PlayStation 2 and pretty much everything else counterpart does. So we're going to move over to that now, which still has that feeling of being kind of a sequel. There is still that familiarity between Spider-Man and the Shocker. Oh yeah, by the way, Vulture's not in this one. Yeah, as far as the mainline console Spider-Man games went, Vulture was kind of a one and done in the first Spider-Man game. So, remember at the start of the Shocker and Vulture story last time in the PSP version, when I told you that Peter kind of had things together?
Mary Jane has just agreed to marry me, and I couldn't wait to share my happiness with everyone.
Well, this time the opposite is true. He's just found out that MJ's now engaged to Jonah Jameson. And Black Cat comes in to try and talk him over to a life of being a superhero and just give up all that Peter Parker stuff. MJ's kind of holding him back. You know, I'm kind of inclined to agree, actually. Black Cat makes a really good point here. And to get him off of his blue spandex-clad butt, she tells him that the Shocker has escaped from prison. And the two track him down to a warehouse in the Lower East Side. And this time Spidey's not alone in the fight, so Shocker should be a piece of cake, right? Well, actually a little subversion. You see, the more people you have by your side, the more people there are to get hurt. And Black Cat gets kind of incapacitated, and Spidey goes to her aid, and the Shocker gets away. Yeah, see that, sometimes alone is better. So, some further Spidey shenanigans later, one fishbowl later, and Spidey decides he's had enough with J. Jonah Jameson. He's gonna storm in there and give him a piece of his mind. But Black Cat talks him out of it. She really does actually have some pretty good advice for Spidey. She instead diverts him to where Shocker is, and they go take him down together. Black Cat is oddly based in this game. Quite a far cry from the usual Black Cat that just blue balls the guy and puts his marriage in turmoil for no reason. So the two chase Shocker down to a facility on Roosevelt Island, a former Oscorp research lab to be precise, where Shocker is using Oscorp's propulsion tech to, oh my god, this looks like a big problem. Shocker is using that tech to go god mode. He's effectively making force fields, so Black Cat goes to shut them off while Peter distracts him. One Shocker defeat later, and Peter acknowledges that, yeah, Black Cat was right all along. And Shocker, all webbed up, has to just watch while these two flirt. Man, that's gotta suck. Getting defeated by your arch nemesis who's now in Chad mode, with this busty load of polygons making innuendos at him. That's gotta sting, right? Gotta feel good for Peter though. I couldn't possibly relate. And that was the last we saw of Shocker, and upon reflection, this is also a really good sequel story to what we saw of Shocker in the previous one as well. It really takes things up a notch, As far as these games go and their depictions of Shocker and Vulture, there is really no discernible difference between the Shocker and Vulture of these games in the RaimiVerse and the Shocker and Vulture that you've got in the comics. It basically feels like those characters basically just waltzed into the RaimiVerse. Whereas characters like Scorpion or Mysterio, there's some definite maintenance to make them fit in that world. I think that in many ways boils down to the fact that Vulture and Shocker are pretty light on story. However, this might not have been the last we'd see of the Vulture in the RaimiVerse, were it not for a few circumstances. For one, Sam Raimi wanted to include the Vulture in Spider-Man 3 as the original third villain of the film instead of Venom, with Ben Kingsley in the role of Peter's burglar nemesis. That's not a word, burglar. Poultry? Peter's poultry, there's gotta be a P word for enemy. Peter's poultry Philistine. No, it doesn't work, does it? That's not alliteration if it's a PH. That doesn't work.
I thought there might be drugs.
It was producer Avi Arad that persuaded Sam Raimi to use Venom in Vulture's place. A call that I'm still a little conflicted on because, well, admittedly, I don't like the whole precedent of producers interfering with the director's vision. But at the same time, I gotta say, I love Spider-Man 3 for everything it is. It'd be a very different movie if it had Vulture instead of Venom. A better one? Who's to say? But it's safe to say I think Sam Raimi would have liked it more that way. However, this wouldn't be Sam Raimi's final attempt at including the Vulture, as the Vulture was billed to be the main villain of Spider-Man 4. The now cancelled movie. God, they really just would not let this guy do Vulture, would they? In an early draft of Spider-Man 4, Vulture would be a criminal mastermind, looking to seize control of New York City's criminal underworld. Like almost every other main movie series RaimiVerse Spider-Man villain though, Toomes would effectively die at his own hand in battle with Spider-Man. The main difference this time being that Toomes has a daughter, someone new to step up and take the mantle, someone who's also a secondary love interest for Peter Parker. And just what we need, another love triangle for Spider-Man. We do also have a leaked animatic of the final battle between Spider-Man and Vulture in Spider-Man 4, as the two would wrangle on top of the Citicorp building, and this would have been probably one of the most brutal Spider-Man fights we'd ever seen. If not just for the broken glass poking out of Peter's back, Vulture straight up slicing Peter through the shoulder, before Peter finally gets the drop on him, and Vulture falls down to his own death, getting impaled through the stomach, and like a real bird of a feather, just flying to his death, while his daughter watches. This daughter we'll talk a little more about in an upcoming episode. This was, of course, just an early draft of Spider-Man 4, and one that Sam Raimi wasn't actually happy with, asking Sony for more time to develop the story. However, it did seem that Spider-Man 4 was all geared up to be Vulture's big screen debut, with John Malkovich being eyed for the role. Moving over to Spider-Man 4, the game, Radical Entertainment were developing the main series version of the game, while a Wii version would be worked on by Eurocom. What's notable about the Radical version is that this would borrow a lot from the prototype games, including in-air combat against helicopters, which would be perfect for a Vulture appearance, no less. And I get the sense they may have had that somewhat in mind. However, these games usually begin production quite a long ways before the movies do, with the main villains of the movies usually being quite a last-minute addition. which would explain why these games were quite light on actual narrative through lines. In May of 2022, a few months after the release of Spider-Man No Way Home and Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man's grand cinematic return, Sam Raimi did comment on Spider-Man 4, stating that they were really looking much more into Kraven the Hunter as the ideas for Spider-Man 4 developed. They were looking much more at Kraven the Hunter being the main villain and Bruce Campbell becoming Mysterio. Whether or not the Vulture would still be involved in this is, well, it's uncertain. So that is the history of the Shocker and the Vulture in the Raimi universe. And yes, when the Spider-Man 3 toy line dropped, these two did get some toy representation as well, looking very much like their video game counterparts. I gotta say as well, if the Vulture were to be a major part of Spider-Man 4 the movie, how would that work with the game's continuity then? Would the Vulture from the first Spider-Man game still be in the fold? Would it be the same character? Perhaps pulling a Spider-Man 3 Scorpion where it could be the same, but then maybe they'd have to show his origins. Who knows? Next episode, we're going to talk a little bit more about Black Cat. Obviously, she played quite a major role in the Shocker story in Spider-Man 2 the game, but she was also expected to play quite a major role in Spider-Man 4 the movie as well, at least an early draft of it. So I'll be talking about that in the next episode of Beyond the RaimiVerse.
Looks like you're done now. Go outside and play.
So what do you guys think? If you enjoyed this video and you want to support more like it, be sure to hit that big, beautiful subscribe button. And of course, in the description below are links to different social media feeds, including the Patreon. If you're feeling extra generous, like the following people, who are Marcus Ward, Sirius the Skeptic, Biotin Arts, Mr. SP, David 20 Covers, Sergio, Shodin, Legendary Ray Ray, Adam Myers. Thank you guys, you are the best of the best. But as for the rest of you, thank you so much for watching, guys, and have a great day.
Look,